right, well, we're here today with the CEO and founder of Candela, Gustav Hasselskog. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
So we've been reporting on your what looks like a truly amazing electric motorcraft, the C7, since 2018 on our show, Tesla Time News. I'd like to start there. I know you've got an even newer boat, but I'd love to start with how you got into making your boat and what it's all about.
Right. So, yeah, my personal background was that I've been mainly into different management positions. And then I turned 40 and realized I was pretty bored about the work I had. So I had to do something completely different. I didn't know what then. So I quit the job and I gave myself like 1 year to figure out. Yeah. So I started back in 2014 to consider really what to do with my professional life. And I had a summer house at the time and had a beautiful American motorboat, a Bertrand 25 with a huge V8 engine in it. It consumed an awful lot of gasoline, and I concluded that boat consumed like 15 times more than the car we had at the time. So I started to think about sort of what can be done about boats. And this was back in 2014, and Tesla started to have some traction. And I was fascinated by the idea to try to do something within boating and kind of apply the same market logic there, that trying to find a product that is not only good, but also looks good. I think before Tesla, you had the Prius. It was doing a pretty good job, but it was not very interesting as a product. So yeah, and then I looked into different hull shapes and so on. I'm an engineer as a background, and fairly soon concluded that planing boats are what they are. You can't do very much about it. You can reduce the mass a bit, and the consumption is basically linear to the mass. But except for that, there is sort of no way to make an electric boat that is a planing boat. So I turned into hydrofoils and looked into that. And what's good with hydrofoils is like normal airplane wings. They're fairly easy to calculate on. You have a simple equation for the drag and a simple equation for the lift. And I kind of underestimated the total drag and thereby the total consumption you would have a bit. But the idea then was let's take kind of half a Tesla-sized battery, which at the time was half of 80 kilowatt hours. So 40 kilowatt hours. And then I concluded that, well, then you would get a range that should be okay for most people. After that sort of boating summer, the autumn came and I had to turn this into sort of something serious or just get a normal job again and feed my family. But I said, let's give it a try.
So I think that the obviously the biggest difference between a Candela and a normal boat, like you said, is the hydrofoil. And for those people who don't really fully understand what a hydrofoil is, it's I think you put it pretty well. It's like a plane wing underwater, and it's because water is denser, you can kind of take off at a much lower speed than you can in air. But it's using the same sort of physics. It's just underwater with a denser fluid. You weren't the first person to come up with a hydroplane, but I haven't seen that many hydroplane boats in the world. Why are they so, few and far between?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, the idea is very old. I think the first record or something like a hydrofoil is from 1890. And then the U.S. military did some experiments with hydrofoils. So did the Russians. But it never really took off at the time. And I think a key reason for that is, there are many. One is probably the fact that fuel and fuel cost was not a topic during the 60s and the 70s, nor was sort of the whole climate topic. So you didn't really have to care about this massive consumption. And I think the other aspect, control electronics, has become much better. The type of a boat we build is an inherently unstable boat. So it's like, in a way, like modern fighter jets, is that if you don't control it, it doesn't go well at all. And that whole electronic is much cheaper today, and we can use pretty much the same type of logic as you use in a drone. And then you have all the material science around carbon fiber and so on that has made this whole thing to work nowadays.
That's so interesting because I mean, I've tried hydrofoiling like on a surfboard kind of thing, and it was difficult to kind of get the hang of. Once you kind of got up, it was like, oh, I think I'm doing it. But I wasn't able to. I mean, I wasn't able to practice enough and get really good at it, like Mark Zuckerberg or something like that. You see him hydrofoiling all the time. If you have controls in the water that can actually do it, that must make it so much easier than having to shift your weight on a boat or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's easier for the user. It's a bit trickier for the engineer to make that work. But that's what we have done and I'd love to do. I mean, the type of engineering we're into is just amazing. You need kind of a full engineering university. All the disciplines are in there, material science, electronics, programming, sensor technology, control theory, dynamic modeling. Now we're into electrical machines as well. So if you like building stuff, it's the perfect product to go after.
This is so impressive. It reminds me of Elon Musk's approach. You took a first principles approach. You said, okay, I need to make this more efficient. What do I need to use? You started with a clean piece of paper, it sounds like. But what's really impressive to me, even more than that, is that you didn't really have a background in making boats and starting companies, and yet you made the leap. And I've seen so many successful CEOs who were a bit naive. I mean, let's be honest, that's what you were.
Yeah, you have to be. Leap.
And it's really impressive because looking back, it must be, I mean, it just sounds impossible what you just did. Like, you put together a team. I think you have over 70 people right now. Not only did you produce the C7, which I want to hear some stats about, but then we're going to get to the C8, which is another level beyond that. So what did you achieve with the C7? What can it do? Give us some of its stats.
So, I mean, back a bit to sort of the principle of hydrofoils. If you take a planing boat, if you talk like lift to drag ratio, it's roughly 4. So if it would have been an airplane, it's like dropping 1 meter and then you're flying 4 meters forward. You can also translate that to sort of running uphill and then with a car, and then you get 1 meter up every meter forward you get. So, and if you try that with a bike, you realize it's a pretty steep hill you're trying to get over, and that sort of gives you the picture of how inefficient the whole thing is. And then you can compare that with, say, airplanes or birds. Take an albatross, for example. There you have this lift to drag ratio is roughly 20. If you take the America's Cup sailing boats, they are around like 17 or something. And we are at around 18 with C7 and slightly more with C8. So if you compare the sort of 17, 18 roughly with 4, and that's the comparison between a hydrofoil boat and a planing boat. And that just, that factor just gives you the amount of batteries you need to throw in to get to a certain range. So C7 is running. We have a battery that we can get 38 kilowatt hours out of. And then we can do around, it depends a bit on the conditions, but roughly 45 to 50 nautical miles. If you run it in, say, 20 knots, then the power you use is around 16 kilowatt, which is a 20 horsepower. So 20 horsepower for a fairly, it's a boat you can throw in 10 people in it if you want, and run 20 knots. That sort of gives you an idea of sort of the efficiency gains with using the type of technology we have.
Now, your boats don't ride on the water that much. They ride above it. So what is the ride like?
Well, it's very different compared to a planing boat. You basically get rid of all the slamming. So, the efficiency is one topic, and that makes it possible to electrify in the first place, because you can't really today with the current battery technology electrify a planing boat. You get no range at the end. But the other thing is that we can, the hull is not in water, and the waves are sort of in between the wings and the hull. And through the control system, we can decide sort of how much we're going to follow the waves and how much we're going to sort of cancel them in terms of movements in a world frame coordinate system. So that is, of course, super fascinating and gives you a very nice ride. And the other aspect is the noise level. I mean, it's nothing compared to a normal boat, so to say. And we're going to talk about C8 later, but we took sort of the last step on the noise topic by taking away all all transmission and in C8. So it's just electric motor straight out to the propellers, and then then the noise is gone, which is pretty fascinating to run 30 knots.
So, I mean, for people who are thinking of a speedboat, they're thinking of a gas-powered planing boat that is going to be going. And the reason you hear that noise is because the boat is, getting some lift, flying up a little bit out of the water, slamming back down into the water, and you get that, and you get the noise, and you get the exhaust fumes. You are taking away, so you're taking away the slamming, because now you're flying under the water, and with the control system, you can control how much waves you actually feel, but you're not slamming into them,
right,
even if you were. So you're gliding. With the C8, you're saying there's absolutely no noise of any motor of whatsoever. So there's no, and obviously electric motors are quieter anyway. So the C7 would be quieter anyway. And then you're also taking away the thing that makes Zach sick on boats. It's not the waves, because he loves sailboats. He hates the diesel fumes.
And then you take away the wake as well. So which is typically a big problem for like we in Stockholm or wherever you are. Boats create awful lot of wakes. That's bad for erosion of the shorelines. It's also pretty tough to run other boats when there is too much wake. So
I've gone canoeing before.
Yeah.
you can destroy a lot of stuff with the wake. And we have something like 5 centimeters, say 2 inches of wake after the boat, which is just, it's crazy. So it's kind of flat after the boat.
All right, so we're looking at the C7 right now. It has what looks like a typical engine on the back, but that's electric. It has the wings. Tell us about this boat, and then let's transition to the C8. So tell us what's different between the C7 and what we're going to see different on the C8.
Yeah, as you say, the default setup we have is same on both boats, both models, which is pretty much as a traffic airplane. You have most of the load on the forward wing, and then you have a smaller wing in the aft. And the reason for that setup is that you create some turbulence with the front wing, and then you want to have a small wing in the aft and sort of optimize the total drag that way. So we do the same thing here. On the whole sort of foil control, the key change in C7 is that we have developed our own height sensors. So we have moved away from ultrasonic sensors and developed our own radar sensor. And we have a lot of them as well, because we were able to sort of push down the price since we took it all in-house. And those sensors are just massively faster. So we can get 300 data points per second per sensor, and we have 10 of them in the boat. And then you can create sort of a full image of the surface below you. And then you can also start to predict how the turbulence sort of under the water, the rotating particles going to impact the wing. So that is a pretty cool thing. The radars are obviously much more reliable also when you have spray and rain and all kinds of tough conditions. So you don't get any bad readings that you need to filter out. So you can speed up the whole control system quite a lot. And then the whole actuation is completely different in C8. And what we wanted to achieve is to take out all mechanical play in the system, which means you get a much tighter control, and the whole feeling in the boat is very different. So we banked the boat in a turn to get the force straight down in the seat, and now there's like basically no difference between the reference roll angle and the actual angle, because we have sort of tightened up the whole mechanics quite a lot. Probably the biggest change in C8 though is the motor that we have developed. So in C7 we had, as I said, sort of a traditional outboard setup with the motor in the aft, and then a shaft going down in the rudder, and then a bevel gear, and then straight out to the propeller shaft. So what we did with C8 was to say, okay, could we potentially move the motors down in the water instead? And then you get into the topic, how small can you make an electric motor? And then you find that, depending a bit on the design, but essentially it's a thermal topic. So you need to get rid of the heat. And then it's pretty good to be down in the water, of course. So you have a head start there. And then you just need to take sort of the heat from the windings of the motor, get a good heat transfer to the stator, and then out to the housing and out to the water. So to work on that whole sort of heat transfer topic was something we spent quite a lot of time on. And then the motors we have now are very small, so they are 1.6 liters each. The other challenge you have with an electric motor is that, or a boat motor, I would say, is that the tip speed of the propeller is limited by the sort of the cavitation limit. So if you run the tip too fast, you create vacuum, and that will erode the propeller. You create noise and stuff like that. That is around 45 meters per second at the tip. So that puts a limit on the RPM you can run on the prop. So, and then if you take a motor, the motor size is proportional to the torque and not to the power, as I believe, at least when I started with this. So the torque is the whole thing, and power is torque times RPM. So if you could find a way to reduce the propeller size, then you could increase the RPM, and then you can lower the torque needed, and then you would lower the size of the motor. So then we ended up putting two propellers on it and making them counter-rotating. And if you do that, you also increase the propeller efficiency quite a lot, from roughly 70% to 80%. So you gain, something like, 14% in range only by the propeller setup.
One incredible piece of CPOD, though, I just want to point out that for boaters out there, is that you claim that it will last a human lifetime without maintenance. And I mean, anyone watching this right now knows that pretty much every fall, you've got to do something to your motor to get it ready for winter. And then every spring, you got to get it ready for motoring again. And it's always maintenance. It's always, being attacked by seawater. This is incredible.
Yeah. So, and that sort of opportunity came against us because we realized we don't have to have any oil in this thing. That would not add any value, because a brushless motor, a permanent magnet motor with a more modern type of inverter, that can run kind of forever. It's the bearings at the end that limits you, but those modern bearings, we run at very low loads. It's like it's probably generations, not a lifetime.
Wow.
So the limitation we have is basically the seals. So we have 3 seals for each shaft to avoid water ingress. And those sit sort of in the housing between the house and the shafts. And those seals needs to be replaced after 3,000 hours. But a normal outboard is designed for less than 500 hours. Then it's sort of used. And you have to replace oil every year, as you say, and stuff. So it's good for the pleasure boat business, but I think it's even more important now when we venture into commercial boats and passenger ferries. Then the service cost is a key topic, and by taking away that almost entirely, the operators save a lot of money.
So you were mentioning sort of the non-consumer side of what Candela can do, because you're saying that most pleasure boats, you're only gonna go for a ride in 18 hours a year. That's the Swedish. I don't know what the American one is.
It's probably the same.
I'm assuming it's fairly similar. So obviously, as a water taxi or some kind of a ferry, it makes a lot more sense. What are Candela's plans in terms of that?
Yeah, so we are now developing the first passenger ferry. It's going to take 30 passengers. We just put 2 of the C-pods on that one. Which is kind of fascinating. I mean, you have these small units. They are, the motors are 95 millimeters in diameter. We just take 2 of those, and then we can have 30 passengers running in 30 knots, which is, it's just crazy in terms of physics, how it's even possible. And that one, we aimed for 3 hours of operation in something like 25 knots. And then 1 hour of charging time. And as mentioned, the cost structure of operators is for us, it's very favorable. So once we get this going, I think it will sell like sugar, I hope. And another fascinating aspect of this, I mean, we're going to have the first boat delivered to the public transportation system in Stockholm. One of the things in Stockholm that sort of limits a bit the use of boats, although Stockholm is just a lot of islands and a lot of water, is all these speed limits you have on water. But once you take away the wake, as we do, then you open up that topic. And So on some stretches, we should be able to have the commuting time, whether you go by car or boat or subway, and then you're going to see a lot of flow into these type of transportation systems. And then we're working on sort of, the full stack of automating the driving as well. So starting with assistance for the drivers. So we have now a team of 6 people that are just working on that topic to read the entire environment, make a picture of that, do the route planning, and so forth, as you do in a traditional self-driving setup. And on top of that, we would then like to add as well the on-demand solution, where you could then, like in Stockholm, you would replace the current 40 diesel ferries with 100 plus of our type of ferries, because they're a bit smaller. And then you would have a central computer that do the routing of all this. And then you can take away all the timetables as well. So it would be a much higher service level for the consumers.
That's exciting. When could we expect to start seeing water taxis and water ferries?
So the idea is to put the first one in water around Christmas this year. And then we're going to start running it with passengers by the summer of next year. So that project is fairly advanced now. And we are starting very soon to mill the molds for that product.
Everyone's excited about Tesla because, they revolutionized the car, but the car has only been around for about 100 years. The boat has been around for as long as we figured out logs could float. We get knots, the speed from, it used to be a guy on the back of the boat tying knots on a string that was floating behind the boat, and that's how you knew how fast you're going. And now you're talking about multiple radars on the bottom of the boat so you can control the surfaces under the water. The whiplash that this gives me from thinking about historical boats and stuff like that to now, this is like a spaceship. And what really impresses me is, that you're the CEO and founder, and we've talked to some CEOs and founders. There are, two kinds. There's one kind of CEO and founder who kind of had the idea and put somebody on it and can't really explain in detail too much of the nitty gritty, but you were able to dive down into, every single topic of it. It's so impressive to me. It really shows that, and it's evident just by the fact that you built your motor in-house. I know, that's so refreshing to me.
Thank you. Although some days I regret we didn't go into canoes instead. That would have been drastically easier when you have a storm of engineering problems to deal with. That would have been nice. A log and then a paddle or something.
Well, let's talk about production and sales. Boats are not cheap. If the old adage goes, if you have to ask how expensive it is, you can't afford it. I think a lot of people who might go to this website are not really boat people, and they might see the price and go like, whoa, that's way too expensive. But we're not taking into account a lot of things, right? Total cost of ownership means you have to take into account maintenance and fuel and the lifetime of the boat. So help us out here. How expensive is this boat if you take all that into account?
Yeah, I think to be honest here, the leisure boats are not used very much. Typically in Sweden, the stats is you use it 18 hours per year. And then if you throw that into a spreadsheet and try to make sort of your return on investment, you get a very long spreadsheet. It is more expensive right now. We have delivered 32 boats so far, and it's still small volume. But the ambition for us is obviously to make this to the de facto standard in pleasure boats going forward, which means that we had for quite big volumes, and we invest now a lot into production and automation of that, and securing that we can come very close to the pricing of combustion engine boats, and then it will be cheaper for the consumer to run this type of boat. But it's not really today. I would say it's probably at least 50% more expensive in purchase, and then take that money and 18 hours per year. But on the other hand, if you look so I think for us the key thing now is we have kind of figured out the technology aspect of this. The next big step for us is to make this to something that is repeatable in terms of production, and really be super serious about the whole production cost topic. So that's where we're heading for now, and that's where we have to raise quite a lot of money right now, because those robots and more advanced type of molds that we're going to use are not cheap. But then if you look on the passenger transport side, so the passenger transport side, there you see a very different equation. Those boats are used a lot. Purchase price is not very important part of the total cost of ownership. Typically, it's like 50% is staff. You have 30%, which is depreciation and service, and then you have 20%, which is fuel. And we take away the fuel costs almost entirely. So already there, you're pretty good. And then we reduce the service cost quite a lot. So there we really reduce the cost by sort of, a lot from day one.
So I have a question about customers. With Teslas, we often talk about butts and seats. We try and get people in the cars to experience the performance, because they're just amazing compared to ICE cars. I've got to imagine that when you actually can get a potential customer in the boat, that they probably have a different experience than they were expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of sells itself when you get them in there, because it's so different. You get rid of the noise, the slamming, the wake. So it's a very, very, very different experience. And also now, I think it's fair to say with the works we have done on the mechanics and the control system, it's a very kind of sporty feeling. I mean, it's super tight in turns. You can push it hard. It responds like in no time to a movement of the steering wheel and so on. So it's we're trying to push it a bit more in the direction of a fighter jet, which is it's just fun. We can do it, and then let's do it.
Now, if someone watching wants to test ride one of these, is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have our second prototype of C8 in water. I think it's next week or something. So and the first one is obviously running, has been doing so since Christmas. So and then we have 32 C7 out there, which is essentially sort of the core experience is the same. It's better with C8, and we have learned a lot. But what's fascinating with C8 is that we sold so many before we put the first prototype in water. Yeah, compared to the car industry, it's not big numbers, but we sold more than 100 before Christmas, and we launched it in September. And then nobody had tried it. I mean, not even us. So, and it's not pre-orders. I mean, it's real contracts, people sending in money to us. So, that's a lot of trust, and shows the interest in the market.
How have investors changed since you started? So you mentioned that when you first started with your idea and you're talking to VCs and they wouldn't really give you the time of day. Now you've got physical boats. Has that changed anything?
Oh, yeah, a lot. So, it was extremely hard in the beginning and like no interest at all, I would say. So I think it's not only sort of my lack of a track record that was the problem at the time. It's also, the boating industry is not something that anybody wanted to invest in, and still is. Among investors, a lot of focus on software and games and apps and stuff like that. So making physical products was a challenge when I started, and then although the climate topic was a big topic among the public, it was not a big topic among investors. A lot of those things have now changed. So we see, I think the investor community is moving more into hardware in general. We see much larger interest there. And then there's a lot of focus now on the sustainability topic among investors. And I think it's fair to say that, at least that's my impression, that the investor community in general has changed the perspective on sort of what are they targeting? Is it only profit, or are there other values they want to put in there as well?
And just to be clear, with emissions, I think according to your website, you said that the Candela C8 is 99% less emissions than a typical comparable boat.
Yeah, I mean, basically there is no emission. It all depends on what sort of electricity source you have. Like in Sweden, it's like essentially either nuclear or hydropower. So we have, I don't know, it's like 1%, I think, fossil based. So that helps. But I think what's interesting here is that since we reduce the energy consumption quite a lot, it's going to be much better than combustion engine boats, even if the electricity source is fossil based.
So as you're going forward, and you're still, I mean, you said that you've made 32 boats. So that's how many you've actually delivered to customers. So production is still fairly small scale compared to, you're not building gigafactories and stuff like that. How do you think that that's going to change with the C8 and further products that you're going to make?
Yeah, so now we have a fairly small facility. We got a quadruple the size, and we went into a new facility this summer, and then we're going to expand that further by doubling it just the year after. So, and then we will set up a factory in the US as well. So the belief now is that we're going to be sort of a supply constrained for the foreseeable future. It's pretty hard to put up production. Sometimes I wish I was in the software business. And you have lead times there as well. I mean, if you want to increase the production with a factor of 10, you don't do that overnight. It takes at least 2 years before the factory is there, all the equipment is there, and you can start churning out. And you need a lot of staff as well. I mean, we recruit 8 people per month. And I think the current number is like close to 90 employees, and it's just increasing. So so that's a big focus for us now to just ramp this as fast as we can.
I mean, Elon talks all the time about how production is the hard part, right? When you finally get to that point, and it sounds like, that's where you're at now, which is a great place to be with a company. Is the limiting factor like batteries? I mean, because that's what we hear about in the EV world. Is that one of your limiting factors, or is it just all the things you need to do, factory space and people and robots?
No, I don't think batteries is a big problem. I think the actual boat building we build in carbon fiber and we use plastics, in our case, epoxy. So to get that whole process of building carbon parts more efficient and faster and shorter cycle times, that is a key thing for us. What is a bit tough here is that we don't really have anybody to follow here. The boat industry is very manual, so you just employ a lot of people, but that will never scale. So we need to invent sort of new production technologies here, especially in the whole sort of carbon boat building area, to make this happen. Because the electric drivetrain as such is, given the current price of batteries, is more expensive than a combustion engine drivetrain. And then we add the foil system to that. And then we need to outperform the others on the rest, sort of the boat.
And so you really want to keep carbon fiber in kind of the bloodline of whatever you're going to be working on well into the future? Like you said that you wanted to incorporate it into kind of how you're going to ramp production, but I don't know of too many companies that have actually ramped carbon fiber production. Maybe the i3 and i8 by BMW, but again, that was, I mean, for an auto company, fairly low numbers. So, I mean, I haven't seen too many other like non-manual carbon fiber production schemes. Is this going to kind of be your innovation that no one really understands, but it's like, oh yeah, Candela, it's a household name?
Yeah, I mean, we need to address that. I think comparing sort of, if you look into what material to build your product in a car, sort of air drag is a key topic for the total consumption. Mass is not as important. The value of lowering the mass is not as big as it is in a boat. So for us, the air drag is something like, depending on speed, like 15 to 20% of the total drag. So the rest is, it's drag from the foil system, and that drag is directly proportional to the mass of the boat. So if you can, if you spend a bit more on the hull, you can reduce the battery size and get the range you want. So yeah, we have sort of modeled that back and forth and still conclude that this is the best way to go. But there is no religion in that at all. I mean, for us, it's just a material, and it has nice properties in terms of strength to weight ratio. We could potentially do something in aluminum, I think it would be interesting to look into sort of sandwich type of aluminum panels. If you think sort of thin panels and then something in between, like honeycomb, whatever. But then you need to invent a bit in welding technology and stuff. But that would be another thing one can do.
You mentioned that people are now knocking on your door. I imagine a lot of people watching right now are investors who are like, I would like to invest in this. But you're, I assume, a private company right now. What's the future look like? Are there any plans to go public? Any plans where investors watching could get involved?
Yeah, so we are. We just raised 20 million euros, a bit more than that, before Christmas, and then we got EQT on board as the lead investor, which is with their newest fund, they're going to be the largest VC in Europe, and they happen to be Swedish as well. But it was kind of my dream investor because they have a culture and a way of investing that I really like. We are right now making another round on the business plan in terms of trying to further increase the growth rate by beefing up the production and doing more earlier, which will require another round. We haven't figured out sort of when and how big that one's going to be, but that's the current thinking. So yeah, they're going to be probably end of this year or something like that. They're going to be an opportunity. We're going to stay private, I think, for quite some time, since we want to invest a lot in reducing the cost of the product. We're going to have negative cash flow for quite some time, and then it's not probably what the typical stock market wants to have. So then sort of a private setting is more suitable.
Thank you so much for talking to us today. If people watching want to learn more, head on over to Candela.com. Also, if you want to do test rides, you mentioned that you can start doing test rides. I think you've got obviously in Sweden, but then I think in California as well.
Yeah. So we like half a year ago, we started a company in the US as well. So and that's based out of San Francisco. So yeah, so we have test boats there as well, and we. By the summer, we're going to have also a C8 in the US, and then can kick off test right there.
Gustav, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It sounds so fascinating what you're doing at Candela. I can't wait to come visit you guys and take a ride in the boats. Again, if you're interested in checking out the Candela, go to Candela.com, and I think you can put a reservation down, although it sounds like you might be waiting a little while, but these are really exciting boats. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you. It was fun to be with you.